Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
And what really interested me about your answer then, I sort of smiled a bit because I've been talking to a colleague quite a lot about this as well. And actually, we're doing a similar session next week. We do a regular sort of podcast together. And the topic was going to be proof of concept versus proof of value, which is quite apt. And it's just interesting that others are talking about this as well, because it's just so often we come up against this concept, and that's what we're trying to move towards. Where proof of value is where ultimately the proof's in the name. You're going to get more value from doing a more detailed proof of value than you are as long as you got the metrics in place to do it right at the end, so everyone and the expectations are set. But it's just an interesting nuance where I think people might put them in the same bucket sometimes, I guess, the two.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I'd say just hearing you talking just now around that, the other thing that I think is quite important around proof of values is that they're not done in isolation by individuals who want to test technology or prove value in their own ecosystem. I think it needs to be connected within the organization. And what I mean by that is it needs to be connected to some sort of organization-wide initiative, because what you want once you do the proof of values, you want to scale it. And if you don't have the connections to scale it, you end up you just maybe think about, how do they call it, POC purgatory, where you have loads of individuals in the organization testing different types of technologies because they're interested, but there's no connection between those tests. And ultimately, if you can't scale something up, then what's the point? You need to be able to scale up, and to be able to scale up, you need the connections in the organization. Who's leading this whether it is factory wide or organization wide. Those organizational connections are really important to make sure that solutions scale and therefore deliver the scale of value that they have the potential for.
I guess just thinking the other risk of a proof of concept, I guess, is, and this has happened often in the past as well, is someone comes along, and maybe it's more so now with predictive maintenance becoming a bit more mainstream. The market's evolved a lot, and AI is now in place. There's a lot of players out there, but there's a lot of people expecting sort of instant value from these tools, sort of switch on, AI does the work, and then the magic happens. I guess that's the danger. And the other thing is, of course, it's, that AI, that's cool right now, let's do that. Predictive maintenance, that's great, let's do a bit of that. Let's give it to someone just to do as a little innovation project, rather than what we would deem as, we've got a proven tool here that is proven at scale and delivered millions of dollars of savings for lots of different customers and things like that. Whereas there's still a mindset sometimes of, let's test it out. We'll give it to like an intern, they can do a little bit of innovation and see. But what interests me, what you were saying, Lina, is that what's the point? I love that phrase actually. What's the point in doing it if you're not going to scale at the end? And that's often why we see these projects fail, because we already know they're going to fail. Especially when you add on top of that it's a small number of assets being monitored as well. 5 assets. I want to monitor these 5 assets. In our world, anyway, that's in the Senseye world. Solutions for that, which is great, but in the Senseye world, it's difficult to scale following that. Sorry, that was a long.
No. It makes sense. I think there's we usually kind of break down and I think it's my boss who came up with this 4 camps that he talks about, and he talks about the people who are asking, where do I start? The guys who are doing POVs or POCs, the ones who are doing MVP, and then the ones that are scaling up, and there are a number of barriers between each of those. So even the fact that you've done a successful minimum viable product that is delivering value in your organization doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to scale up straight away. There's still a number of things that you need to achieve in terms of critical mass of skills, for example, or organizational connections, organizational structures, the nature of your platform to be able to really scale up the benefits.
Yeah, and what we see as the drivers behind this, I guess, as well. We often refer to important like users or champion. We call them PDM champions internally, but the people who are going to drive change within the organisation and go to other areas of the business and say, look, we've done this great stuff, we think you should too, and then almost create an evolving sort of community around a product. I guess does Microsoft sort of subscribe to that same theory as well, in terms of having, obviously the more champions the better, I guess is the answer, isn't it? That's where you want to grow, but ultimately at that very early stage you need a small number of people to really get the momentum behind the project and get the buy-in from the people who need to be bought into it.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose there are different ways of doing it, and different organizations approach it in a different way, and there are different valid approaches. But there's one of the concepts that is sometimes used is similar to what you're talking about. Is this center of excellence kind of concept, where as you're developing MVPs, you're kind of developing a team of people and capabilities that then make it easier for the next factory and the next factory to adopt the same solution and kind of gain momentum. And so there are different ways of achieving that, what I call the snowball effect. Scaling up is that snowball effect. How can you gain that ability of growing and getting faster as you progress from one use case to another use case, or it can be from one factory to another, one production line to another.
Yeah, and it just reminds me of one of the Siemens customers we're working with, who can't be named necessarily for this reason, but they actually have a Senseye school now. So they've scaled up from obviously one site, globally, and have increased where they're deployed. I think it's 6 or 7 sites now, but they now have what they call a Senseye school, where people literally come into a classroom, and it's not a Senseye person being, consultant being paid to come in and talk to a group. It's the users themselves, or these key users themselves, which I think is a real testament to.
Brilliant, yeah.
And that's when we know things really special are happening, when users are that engaged, that without any real prompting from us, they're seeing opportunities of how to use the product and how to teach it to other people. They know the context themselves. Who better to do it? But I just thought that was a wonderful sort of story, actually. But
it sounds like a great example of the kind of thing that really allows scaling up. It's a great example.
So I'm going to come to the very special question we talked just before we hit record, which is very broad. So we'll see where it goes and come back in. So you don't need to dive into any particular area. I'll sort of draw it back, I guess, to somewhere. But so I was wondering whether we could whether Lina, you could share some examples of manufacturing innovation through digital technologies. What you've experienced in your, with your background. It'd be fascinating to hear that.
Yeah, I think as we were discussing that, it was quite broad, because I suppose there's the purpose of digital manufacturing or digital technology in manufacturing is always to drive improvement. And I suppose is when do you deem that improvement and innovation, and at what level? So it's kind of hard to say, you see organizations changing practices, or changing procedures, or changing the calibration of a machine, for example, and those are things that probably stay more in the improvement bag. But sometimes you see that there are areas where usually where you see a lot of big patterns, and I think those big patterns can lead to things like, for example, changes in actual processes. So that there are organizations who have been doing this for a while and working very closely with the machine providers, for example, and some of the work that they have been doing and the patterns that they have identified have actually led to changes in the machine design, for example. So that's improvement at a level what I would class as innovation in a manufacturing process. Or you see areas where there are manufacturing organizations that have such a mature approach to data aftermarket, where they really understand what's happening with their products aftermarket, where they really understand the behavior, what are the things that cause, for example, quicker degradation or things like that. And I think when they're able to connect that to product design and drive product design changes as a result of that, again, I would class that as innovation. So I think it's not a black or white, but I think the wider reaching your data approach is, the more likely it is to lead to innovation. When I say wider reaching, I think I mean the more data sources you have connected, the more use cases you have connected, the more parts of the value chain you have connected, but also the closer you do collaborations with the ecosystem around you as well. That's more likely to lead to actual innovation.
Yeah, so I guess in a lot of ways what you're saying, so rather than doing, for example, predictive maintenance over here, but it's joining it up to other areas like quality and sustainability and other, product design, you even said as well. So it's not doing some of these things in isolation. It's part, and I guess that's all part of what we're saying as well. When it's an enterprise, so it has to be like that, really. These things, if it's going to work at scale across an enterprise, it has to work like that, really. It has to fit in, I guess, with existing processes and enhanced processes, of course.
Yeah, and I think you gave a really nice example of 3 things that could be really intrinsically connected around predictive maintenance or the performance of an equipment to the quality of the product that is being manufactured, to potentially sustainability in terms of scrappage or waste or energy consumption, for example. And when you start putting all of these things together over a period of time and you have the right relationships with your partners, you can achieve real innovation and drive real change.
Yeah, no, of course. And actually, just when you say when we mention partners again, I know we're sort of going back because we sort of covered it a little bit before, but it's just interesting because what I was thinking is there's obviously big opportunities working with partners, but is there challenges as well? To I don't know. Yeah, so it might be good to dive into that. And it's not to say, I mean, I think life in anything has challenges, right? So it's not it's the same thing as we like to be quite honest. That regular session I talked about with my colleague Nat, it's called The Truth About Predictive Maintenance, and it's called that for a reason. So we're not, pretending that it's just magic and you switch it on and off it goes. Because if someone comes and is interested in the product and it doesn't do that, then we've obviously missold there and mismarketed, I guess, in a way. But so it'd be interesting to see what some of those challenges about partners working together, because it sounds great on paper and it absolutely makes sense from that enterprise and scalability. And I guess they're all on the same page for a start, which I guess is a good thing too.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges in partnerships, I mean, it's kind of like a marriage. You're more likely to have a row with your partner than with someone you don't know very well. So it does bring challenges, but it's a matter of, I think, investing time and kind of trust. I think those 2 things are quite critical to building a good partnership. And we have it with customers as well. There are some customers who just is transactional. They just buy this thing from us and we never speak again. Very few of those. We always try to go towards more, what else can we do for each other? How else can we work together? How can we understand our objectives and our missions and our the things that we're trying to achieve better, so that we can align them and therefore unlock more value? So there's an element around that investment of time in the relationship or in the partnership, and if you don't invest that time, there's no magic wand when it comes to partnerships where you're just going to unlock a strategic partnership, turn up to a meeting, say we're strategic partners, off we go. It doesn't quite work like that. So one of the challenges is you need to invest time and get people's buy-in, and you can only do that with trust. And that's probably I'm not an expert in trust. I wish I was, but it's one of the things that is critical. How do you build trust from the beginning, and that kind of wins the willingness of people to actually work in that partnership. So sorry, this is kind of all non-technical, and that I'm not an expert at this topic, but just from my experience, those are some of the challenges or the key things that are required for partnership to work.
Oh no, exactly. I mean, technology is the technology challenge is always a separate podcast in itself, if I'm being honest. But yeah, it's just interesting how, and especially but we don't use Siemens as a particular example. But yeah, I just mean when there's like companies of that size coming together. But I guess ultimately it's focusing on the what's good for the end customer, because if they're not happy, then no one's successful, are they? So I guess that's I mean, it's pretty, I guess it's pretty obvious, really, isn't it? It's always focused on the customer outcomes and what's best for them, rather than internal, or whether it's internal within partners. I mean, about how do we do this? How we should do this kind of thing. But what's best for the customer ultimately? It's what we're here for, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100%. That's as you were saying, is the fact that organizations are collaborating so closely. Ultimately, it always delivers value to the customer, whether it is in accelerating time to value, and these are all things that we have seen with Siemens, accelerating time to value because we have done certifications, for example, because we have invested in integrations, or also in terms of innovative technologies. And that's another area we've invested together a huge amount of time and resources in innovating together. And some of the things that we've done together with Siemens are brilliant. Things like the integration of Team Center in Teams. I always love it because it's like double teams. Or the integration of generative AI into that and like record time scales. I remember when I saw the demonstrator at Hanover Messe, and I couldn't believe how quickly that got done. And all of those things are value to customer, a huge amount of value, whether it is because they can achieve it quicker or because they can achieve new things. And they've only done because Microsoft and Siemens have invested time, and they have the trust, and we have an ever closer relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I'd speak up for Microsoft sort of before, like talking from Senseye as they were before the acquisition, because so obviously it's great. Obviously, it makes absolute sense and great reasons why you'd work with a large multinational company like Siemens, but it's also working with companies like Senseye. I mean, we've had integrations working with Teams, for example, so cases from the app showing in Teams, and close relationships with Gamma. So it just shows if we're talking partners again, is that the broad range of partners. It's not just the big players in the market, which is obvious, but also smaller up and coming ones, as Senseye, for example, was at the time. And again, so I guess Microsoft's got a big commitment sort of SMEs and scale up and startups as well, to partner with those type of companies too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this disruption and leading edge technologies is likely to come from larger organizations, because they have the heritage, the resources, the expertise to build innovative technology, as it is for startups and smaller organizations, because they have the agility, they don't have the legacy, they can move a lot quicker. They often have people that you can see in other organizations in terms of the type of skills and spirit, I suppose, they have. So innovation and disruptive innovation and valuable innovation is as likely to come from larger partners as it is from small. So as you say, we're very keen and always keeping an eye on what's happening in the market and who are the smaller organizations that we should also be partnering with and helping grow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Both large and small have something to bring to the table, has been proven. But I just wanted to move the subject towards sort of predictive maintenance in general, and the market and where we are today, because it has been an interesting change. I've been in this role for over 2.5 years, and seen the market change like markedly. So I was just wanted to get your view on that first of all, Lina, about how the market's evolved.
It's evolved so far. I think so far what I have seen in the last, I suppose, kind of my first exposure to predictive maintenance was probably around maybe 8 years ago or so. And I think what I have seen, and I think you mentioned it earlier in the organization, is just the maturity of the market and the fact that I think a lot of people are a lot more comfortable with the idea of predictive maintenance, and the solutions are a lot more mature, and they're not just in the area of we're trying technologies and kind of see what works, and some of them work, some of them don't work. There's kind of an established discipline, and I think is a lot clearer, what are the things that you need for a predictive maintenance project to succeed. And actually, if you have all of those things, it probably will succeed. And there's a better understanding of what's required in terms of integration and in terms of data requirements if you're going to do things like actual predictive maintenance and machine learning. So I think there's been a real maturity of the market in a way that is a lot easier for manufacturers to now adopt it, especially because there are, I think 10 years ago, it was more, let's tinker around with algorithms, and now there are very mature solutions like Senseye that companies can just come deploy and get the value out of it.
And yeah, it's interesting. And the other side of it, do you think companies, organizations are much more sort of culturally ready for predictive maintenance? Or how much, I guess, first of all, so how much importance do you place on sort of being culturally ready for a technology such as predictive maintenance? Does that play a role?
I think there's a big variability of maturity in the market, and I think when I started with this topic of digital manufacturing, we were like 15 years ago, 12 years ago, under that name, I think it was all around. Most organizations were in the first camp where they're saying, what is the business case? I don't really know even what technologies are there, what are the problems that they can solve? Can they really solve it? What's the return of investment? So it was a very risky area. I think we are now at the stage where the market has matured a huge amount. You have organizations who have done, they have done predictive maintenance. It's almost embedded. It's like a continuous improvement thing, and they're asking, what's next? What else could I do? But there's still a spread. There are still people at the POC kind of level. There are people doing some MVPs. So I think there's a real variety in the sector. That you were asking also around culture, and I think that that is fundamental. Well, I'm not sure if culture is the right word. Maybe mindset, and that mindset that digital is almost just second nature to anything you do in a manufacturing environment. It's just the tool. This is the same thing that we've been trying to do for decades in manufacturing, because there's always been a real heritage of continuous improvement, everything around Six Sigma, the MAIC, all of that. And all digital is doing is improving our ability to do those same things, measure things, improve it, control it, start again, kind of act, measure, start again. So I think there is an almost a mindset that people see digital technology as something that is just second nature, not just a separate thing. That is like, it's the same as sustainability these days. Some organizations just hire a head of sustainability and they think that's going to solve the problems. And the poor head of sustainability is there trying to get the buy-in from everyone, and everyone is saying, well, you do your thing, I have different problems, and they don't understand, well, it's the same thing. It needs to be integrated within the organization.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.